This seat is reserved for premium passengers. The flight attendant's voice cut through the quiet cabin, loud enough for every head in first class to turn. 14-year-old Adrian Cole didn't argue. He simply looked up, eyes as cold as winter glass. First class ticket in one hand, phone calling his father in the other. Slowly, he stood, stepping aside as whispers spread. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody guessed what that single call would trigger. 5 minutes later, 180 airports would freeze, and the skies would learn a lesson about power, dignity, and the cost of underestimating the quietest passenger on board. Adrian Cole sat in seat 1A, first class, his posture perfectly straight, eyes as cold and steady as glassy ice. In one hand, the embossed ticket that clearly read, First Class, Seat 1A. In the other, a sleek phone with an active call screen glowing faintly. Alexander Cole, his father, ringing somewhere thousands of miles away. The cabin was hushed until the sharp cadence of heels tapped closer. Clara Benton, the lead flight attendant, stopped beside his seat, her professional smile tight, her eyes sharp. "Sir," she began, her tone polite but undercut with authority, "I believe you're in the wrong seat." Adrian didn't respond immediately. He simply looked up, gaze unflinching. "This is my seat," he said, voice calm, quiet, and absolute. Clara leaned in slightly, her tone firming. "Seat 1A is reserved for premium travelers. This is unusual." She glanced at his ticket, lips tightening, and then smiled thinly. "There's been a change. We'll need to move you." Her words were meant for him, but loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. A few curious heads turned. A man in 1B raised an eyebrow. A woman across the aisle whispered to her companion. Adrian said nothing more. The phone still hummed quietly in his hand, his father's call unanswered. Clara's voice cooled a degree. "This seat has been reassigned for a special guest, someone of particular importance." The implication dripped between her words. Whispers spread like ripples in still water. "Who is it for?" someone muttered. "Maybe a politician's son." Adrian's expression didn't flicker. Without a word, he slid his ticket into the inside pocket of his blazer. He stood slowly, movements deliberate, as if each step was measured against something invisible. Clara, sensing victory, gestured down the aisle. "Your new seat is prepared in economy." The distance from first class to economy felt longer than the cabin itself. Eyes followed him, some curious, others amused. In row 34, the narrow middle seat awaited him, crammed between a man tapping furiously on his laptop and a woman scrolling on her phone. Adrian lowered himself into the cramped seat without complaint. The cold glint in his eyes didn't fade. It only sharpened. His phone still displayed the active call screen. Alexander Cole had yet to pick up. Somewhere far from the cabin, in a corporate boardroom, a muted phone vibrated across a polished oak table. No one yet realized that the quiet boy now seated at the back was holding more than a boarding pass. He was holding the first thread in a chain that could shake the skies. The shuffle of feet and the murmur of quiet amusement followed Adrian as he moved down the aisle. Every step felt measured, controlled, his spine straight despite the cramped path toward the economy cabin. The flight hummed with its usual undercurrent of engine noise, but in scattered pockets of the first-class section, passengers subtly lifted their phones. A few recorded discreet clips, the boy with the icy expression being escorted away from the most expensive seat in the cabin. In row 34, the middle seat waited. Adrian slid into it without visible irritation. On his left, a man in a wrinkled shirt typed aggressively into a laptop. On his right, a woman watched a reality show on her tablet, oblivious to the small storm that had passed just feet ahead. 2 rows back, a man wearing a gray blazer leaned toward his seatmate, his voice low. "That kid?" he whispered. "Doesn't he look familiar to you?" His companion glanced briefly at Adrian, then back to him, brow furrowed. "I can't place it, but there's something." The observation didn't travel far, but it was enough to plant the first seed of suspicion. the kind that lingers quietly until it finds a reason to grow. Adrian, unbothered, removed his phone from his pocket again. The screen still displayed the ongoing call to his father. No answer. A soft tone indicated that the call had rolled over to voicemail. Without hesitation, Adrian ended the call, locked the phone, and rested it face down on the tray table. Around him, passengers in economy quickly lost interest. Someone ordered a soda. Someone else asked for headphones, but the man in the gray blazer glanced over his shoulder one more time, curiosity catching in his expression. Adrian reached into the inside pocket of his blazer and withdrew the first-class ticket. He studied it for a moment. The bold letters, Seat 1A, printed in black. His expression didn't change, but the faintest trace of a breath passed through his nose, a sound that could almost be mistaken for a silent laugh. Outside the narrow window beside him, clouds drifted across a pale sky. The hum of the aircraft was steady, lulling, but his eyes were sharp. Still, he said nothing. Somewhere in the front of the plane, Clara Benton was smiling, satisfied. She believed the matter resolved. She believed Adrian had been put in his place. In row 34, Adrian simply folded his ticket in half, slid it back into his pocket, and glanced at his phone screen once more. A single missed call notification glowed back at him. His father had seen his name. The skies above them were calm. For now, the hum of the engines filled the cabin as the minutes crawled forward. Adrian remained still, his posture unchanged, eyes fixed on the shifting light beyond the window. But movement from the aisle broke the steady rhythm. Clara Benton. She passed by with a practiced smile, checking overhead bins, adjusting cabin curtains. Yet each time her gaze swept toward row 34, there was the faintest trace of satisfaction in her expression, as though the sight of Adrian wedged into a middle seat confirmed some unspoken victory. As she reached the front of economy again, her voice lifted, just enough for several passengers to hear. "Some people think a ticket is all it takes to be in first class," she said to a junior attendant, tone light but lined with steel. "They don't realize there's more to it than that." The junior attendant nodded awkwardly, glancing toward Adrian. Adrian didn't react. His fingers rested lightly on the edge of his phone, but his eyes never left the aisle. In first class, a minor commotion broke the quiet. A tall man in a tailored suit frowned at the glass in his hand. "This is not the drink I ordered," he said sharply. Clara stepped forward quickly, her smile snapping back into place. "My apologies, sir. I'll have it replaced immediately." The man's voice carried. "This is first class. I expect the standard to match." His irritation drew the attention of nearby passengers. Clara hurried to smooth things over, moving with crisp efficiency. She didn't glance toward economy as she passed Adrian's row again, but the edge of her voice returned when she spoke to the junior attendant. "Some passengers take their seats for granted. Others earn them." It was the kind of comment designed to sting and meant for a specific listener. Adrian's gaze tracked her movement without turning his head. He didn't flinch, didn't shift in his seat. But his eyes, the same cold, unyielding eyes that had met her in 1A, followed her every step. The commotion in first class died down. The dissatisfied passenger appeased. Clara returned to her duties, confident her earlier actions had gone unnoticed by the larger crew. But in row 34, Adrian's focus had not wavered once. Each detail, the drinks, the words, the faces, was quietly filed away. A soft chime from his phone vibrated against the tray table. A single notification pulsed on the dark screen. He didn't touch it. Not yet. Above them, the flight remained smooth. But tension, like the air at cruising altitude, was thinning, ready to shift with the slightest change. The cabin was quiet again, but Adrian's mind was not. Clara's words lingered in the air, but they slid past him like wind over steel. His phone, resting on the tray table, pulsed once more, a soft, steady light that no one else noticed. He unlocked the screen with a casual swipe. Instead of the usual home display, A dark interface emerged, lined with sharp silver text. AeroEthics Protocol. Tier access detected. The screen shimmered faintly, awaiting input. A quiet hum built beneath the surface of the phone as Adrian scrolled. This was not an ordinary system. The AeroEthics Protocol was the legacy of Dr. Evelyn Cole, his mother. Designed as a hidden safeguard, it monitored airline conduct for violations of ethics, passenger rights, and discrimination. It was never fully deployed. Until now. A quiet shift of air passed through row 34. Adrian's fingers hovered over the sequence pad. He didn't initiate anything yet. Timing mattered. Thousands of miles away, in a security control center in New Jersey, a bank of monitors displayed data streams from various flights. Among them, a junior systems analyst named Lewis spotted something odd. A Tier 1 handshake request pinging from Flight 729, currently en route to London. Mike, Lewis called to his supervisor. We've got a Tier 1 ping from a live flight. That shouldn't even be possible. Mike leaned over, frowned at the screen. Tier 1? That's Cole-level clearance. Are you sure this isn't a false flag? Lewis shook his head, eyes narrowing at the trace. The signal's encrypted, and it's not coming from the cockpit. It's coming from the passenger manifest zone. Mike straightened. Passenger side? That's not standard. Back on the plane, Adrian closed the AeroEthics interface for now. The hum of the engines masked the faint shift in his breathing. His expression was unchanged, but the subtle flicker of the screen had been enough to set a chain reaction into motion hundreds of miles away. In the front cabin, Clara passed again, still busy with her service rounds, unaware of the quiet storm gathering just rows behind her. Adrian leaned back, his phone resting in his palm. No rush. The moment wasn't here yet, but every variable was aligning, and when the timing was right, he wouldn't need to raise his voice or leave his seat. Somewhere in New Jersey, an encrypted signal blinked again on Lewis's screen. It's steady, he murmured. Whoever's holding that clearance, they're waiting. Adrian's gaze returned to the clouds outside. Waiting was something he understood very well. Adrian's thumb hovered over the screen for a moment, his expression unreadable. The AeroEthics protocol glowed faintly, waiting for his decision. Then, with the same calm precision that had marked his every move, he entered the command. Tier 1 lockdown. Engage. The confirmation was immediate. The phone vibrated once, the interface pulsing in a clean ripple of light. In less than 30 seconds, a hidden wave of encrypted instructions fanned out across international air traffic systems. In the control tower at JFK, a technician's monitor flashed red. Priority override. Ethics lockdown engaged. Boarding systems froze. Lounge entry systems glitched. VIP upgrades suspended mid-processing. At Heathrow, similar alarms triggered. The lead systems officer frowned. We just lost half our premium processing nodes. Simultaneously. Within 2 minutes, over 180 airports reported cascading failures. None of it traced back to Flight 729. At least, not yet. Adrian's phone displayed a steady pulse of status confirmations. He turned it face down on the tray table again, the action as casual as closing a book. But far away in Dubai International Airport, something unexpected happened. Their system also tripped into ethics lockdown, but the signature code was different, similar to AeroEthics, but not identical. In the New Jersey Security Center, Lewis's brows knit together. Mike, we've got a problem. Dubai just flagged an override, but it's not from the Cole encryption tree. Mike leaned in, jaw tightening. You mean someone else is running a parallel lock? Lewis nodded slowly. And whoever it is, they're synced with Adrian's activation window, almost like they were waiting for it. Back on Flight 729, Adrian scrolled briefly through his phone's secure log. His gaze sharpened at a new notification. Secondary signal detected. Source: unknown. His jaw tightened slightly, not in fear, but in recognition that the field had just shifted. In first class, Clara Benton continued her service, unaware that the entire premium access grid was folding in on itself. She believed her earlier actions were done, that the boy in row 34 had been reduced to silence. Adrian leaned back in his seat, the hum of the engines filling the space around him. He didn't need anyone to know what had been set into motion. The lockdown was live. But now there was another player in the game. For Adrian, this wasn't a setback. It was a variable, and he knew exactly how to handle variables. In the FAA Operations Center in Washington, D.C., the usual hum of controlled chaos shifted into something sharper. Alarms were not blaring, but the tempo of voices had quickened. "Sir, we have a Tier 1 ethics lockdown across more than 180 airports," a senior systems coordinator reported, sliding a digital map onto the main display. Each glowing red point marked an affected airport. At the head of the room, Director Whitmore adjusted his glasses, his lined face impassive. He studied the map with the slow, calculated patience of someone who didn't just see a problem, he saw an opportunity. Whitmore had a history with Alexander Cole. Years ago, Cole Aviation had blocked one of Whitmore's favored policy proposals, costing him political capital. And now, the son of Alexander Cole was in the middle of a system-wide ethics disruption. "Source?" Whitmore asked coolly. An aide responded, "Primary trace links to Flight 729, passenger zone. And sir, the system signature is consistent with the AeroEthics protocol." Whitmore's brow furrowed faintly, but his eyes held a gleam. "AeroEthics? That's Cole Tech." "Yes, sir. Developed by Dr. Evelyn Cole. Deployed, unofficially, by her son, it appears." Whitmore straightened his tie. "Issue a preliminary advisory. Classify it as a potential misuse of restricted aviation technology." The room stilled. "Sir, you want to go public already?" Whitmore's smile was faint but sharp. "I want the record clear. This is not a system failure. This is Cole Aviation overstepping. Again." Across the country, news outlets began receiving anonymous tips. The phrasing was precise. Ethics lockdown linked to Cole family system. FAA reviewing misuse of federal aviation protocols. Back on Flight 729, Adrian's phone vibrated again. This time, a notification of the advisory. His expression didn't change, but the secondary signal still flickered in the corner of his secure interface, the ghost of another operator shadowing his work. In economy, a passenger glanced at his own phone and frowned. "Hey, isn't this the same flight?" He angled the screen toward his neighbor, showing a news alert. A ripple of quiet speculation spread among the seats. Some turned their attention toward Adrian again. Whitmore, back at FAA HQ, issued his next order. "Prepare for an emergency directive to ground Cole Aviation flights if we confirm unauthorized deployment." It was a bold move, and one he fully intended to follow through, unless Alexander Cole bent. For the first time, the danger wasn't just Clara Benton's humiliation. It was the entire weight of the FAA angling its sights at Adrian. At FAA headquarters, the room was silent except for the low hum of servers. The trace was complete. The encrypted AeroEthics signal had been matched with a manifest name. "Passenger identification confirmed," a technician announced, eyes fixed on the display. "Source: Flight 729, row 34, Adrian Cole." Whitmore's thin smile deepened. "Alexander Cole's son. Confirm that in the record." The official memo went live within minutes. FAA identifies source of Tier 1 lockdown. Passenger Adrian Cole under investigation for unauthorized system activation. On Flight 729, the news traveled faster than the cabin's filtered air. Passengers with internet access began whispering, turning in their seats to glance at row 34. Adrian, in his usual cold stillness, did not acknowledge the shifting attention. In the media sphere, the story was taking shape. But then came the twist Whitmore didn't expect. Mia Carter, an investigative journalist traveling incognito in first class, had caught the entire incident on camera. The footage was crisp. Clara Benton approaching 1A, speaking in that cool, cutting tone, asking Adrian to move. the boy's calm refusal. Her final assertion, "This seat is reserved for someone more important." By the time the FAA's memo was trending, Mia's video was already climbing faster. First-class discrimination shot to the top of social platforms. Comments erupted. "That's the CEO's son? She kicked him out just for how he looked?" No wonder the system went down. Within half an hour, the FAA's narrative was losing ground. The public wasn't seeing Adrian as a rogue operator. They were seeing a quiet teenager humiliated in front of a cabin of strangers. In the galley, Clara's phone buzzed with a message from her supervisor. "Report to HQ immediately upon landing. FAA request. Temporary suspension pending investigation." Her confident smile from earlier cracked. She stepped into the crew area, speaking in a low, urgent voice to another attendant. "They can't suspend me over this. It was a misunderstanding." The other attendant's expression was uneasy. "Clara, the video's everywhere." Clara's eyes widened. "What video?" Back in row 34, Adrian's phone remained face down on the tray table. He hadn't posted the video. He hadn't spoken a word to any passenger. But the truth was already flying faster than Flight 729 could cross the Atlantic. For Clara Benton, the turbulence was just beginning. The announcement came over the crew's secure channel mid-flight. Clara Benton was summoned to the forward galley by the captain himself. She arrived to find Captain Reynolds standing with a printed directive in hand, his face unreadable. "Ms. Benton," he began evenly, "the FAA has issued a temporary suspension effective immediately. Upon landing, you are relieved of active duty pending investigation into a Tier 1 ethics incident." Clara's face drained of color. "Captain, that's absurd. This is a misunderstanding. I followed protocol." Reynolds' expression didn't change. "The video circulating says otherwise. FAA wants your badge turned in upon arrival. I suggest you prepare your statement." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara took a step back, the galley walls suddenly feeling too close. She knew her career wasn't just on pause. It was dangling by a thread. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away at FAA headquarters, Director Whitmore was putting the next phase of his plan in motion. "Gentlemen," he addressed the legal committee, "this lockdown isn't just about one overstepping flight attendant. It's about control of AeroEthics, a system created by Cole Aviation, now actively disrupting global operations." One advisor raised a brow. "You're suggesting formal hearings?" Whitmore gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yes, and we'll require Alexander Cole to testify under oath regarding the deployment, security protocols, and oversight of AeroEthics. His son may have activated it, but the system belongs to Cole Aviation. That makes this corporate liability." The committee murmured. A formal summons was drafted within the hour. "Alexander Cole is hereby requested to appear before the FAA Oversight Committee to address potential misuse of proprietary aviation control systems." Back on Flight 729, the ripple effect was immediate. Adrian's phone lit with a secure message from his father. "FAA wants a hearing. They're moving against the company." Adrian's gaze stayed calm, his fingers resting on the device without typing a response. Clara's suspension was nothing compared to the strategic play Whitmore had just made. In first class, murmurs spread as the news leaked from the crew. "They've suspended her mid-flight," one passenger whispered. "And now they're going after Cole Aviation?" In row 34, Adrian's eyes drifted back to the clouds outside. Clara Benton's downfall was only the first stone. The FAA's aim was higher, and Adrian was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The turbulence had shifted from the sky to the market floor. By the time Flight 729 crossed the Atlantic midpoint, Cole Aviation stock had dropped 7%. Investors weren't reacting to technical glitches. They were reacting to uncertainty. In the Cole Aviation headquarters, a special board meeting had been called. The walls of the glass-walled conference room echoed with terse voices. "This lockdown is a PR disaster," one board member said sharply. "The FAA has their hooks in us, and the public thinks our systems are being misused." Alexander Cole sat at the head of the table, his voice measured. AeroEthics was designed to protect passengers, not disrupt them. We will clarify that in the hearing. Another director leaned forward. Clarification won't stop the slide. We've had 3 major institutional investors pause funding. Shareholders are worried we can't stabilize the system. A new voice entered the discussion. The representative of Aerosky Alliance, one of Cole Aviation's largest competitors. If Cole Aviation cannot guarantee operational control of AeroEthics, he said smoothly, our consortium is prepared to acquire the technology. We have the resources to secure it before the FAA pushes for decommissioning. The room went still. It was a power play disguised as an offer. Alexander's jaw tightened. AeroEthics isn't for sale. The Aerosky representative smiled faintly. For now. But if the FAA suspends your operational licenses, the choice may no longer be yours. Back on Flight 729, Adrian received another encrypted update. Cole Aviation stock dropping. Hostile. Acquisition rumors detected. His expression didn't change, but the faintest narrowing of his eyes signaled calculation. In first class, passengers whispered about the unfolding drama. One checked the markets on his phone. Cole's stock is tanking, he murmured. This could cripple them. In economy, a passenger 2 rows back snapped a photo of Adrian, now recognized from the news feeds, and posted it online. The caption read, "This kid's at the center of everything." Meanwhile, at FAA HQ, Whitmore followed the market drop with quiet satisfaction. The more Cole Aviation bled value, the easier it would be to pressure them into concessions or dismantle their control of AeroEthics altogether. For the first time, the risk wasn't just about a PR battle or an ethics scandal. Cole Aviation was staring at the possibility of losing its crown jewel to a rival. And in row 34, Adrian knew it. But his calm never wavered. By the time Flight 729 crossed into European airspace, the internet was in full eruption. On one side, hashtags surged. #Stand with Adrian. #Ethics first. #Cole protection. Supporters posted clips of Adrian's calm demeanor, the video of Clara's condescension, and old interviews of Dr. Evelyn Cole explaining the philosophy behind AeroEthics. On the other side, detractors shouted just as loudly, "Lock him out. #ground Cole. #FAA control now." They claimed no individual family should hold override power over global aviation systems. Memes mocked a teenager shutting down the skies. The debate spilled into live news. A panelist declared, "This is a wake-up call. AeroEthics cannot be a private weapon." Another countered, "Weapon? It was designed to protect passengers from exactly what we saw in that video." Then came the twist nobody saw coming. Late that afternoon, an anonymous upload appeared on a public whistleblower site. The files were stamped with internal Cole Aviation headers from a decade earlier. A group identifying themselves as Evelyn's Crew, former engineers who had worked under Dr. Evelyn Cole, had released archived AeroEthics case reports. The documents detailed incidents where AeroEthics simulations had prevented discriminatory actions. A wheelchair-bound passenger denied boarding at a partner airline. AeroEthics triggered a compliance review that restored their booking within minutes. A single mother and child downgraded without reason. AeroEthics intervention secured their seats and led to a public apology. A group of foreign exchange students targeted by profiling. AeroEthics blocked the action and forced a crew retraining session. The stories went viral instantly. Headlines shifted. AeroEthics saved thousands. Cole system proven to protect vulnerable passengers. Support for Adrian swelled. Comment sections overflowed. So this is what they want to shut down? Figures. If FAA takes it, it'll just be buried like every other reform. In the FAA headquarters, Whitmore scowled at the shifting public sentiment. He had underestimated the emotional weight of Evelyn Cole's legacy. Back on Flight 729, Adrian scrolled briefly through the released documents. His face remained composed, but his grip on the phone tightened ever so slightly. His mother's work had always been more than just code. It was protection. It was memory. it was justice. The tide was turning. The world wasn't just debating whether he should have acted. They were beginning to debate whether they could afford for him not to. In the FAA conference room, tension had shifted from confident control to reluctant concession. Director Whitmore stood at the head of the table, the weight of public opinion pressing on every decision. His advisors whispered in low, urgent tones. "The optics are collapsing," one of them admitted. "The Evelyn Cole files have reframed the narrative. We can't present this as a rogue action anymore, not without backlash." Whitmore exhaled through his nose, clearly displeased. But the pressure from beyond FAA walls was mounting. The International Air Transport Association had weighed in that morning. Their statement was measured but firm. Passenger protections must be reinforced, not dismantled. AeroEthics proves the viability of such measures. By midday, the FAA and IATA convened in an emergency joint session. The conclusion was unavoidable. AeroEthics would not be dismantled. It would be codified. The official announcement rang out on every major news outlet. The AeroEthics passenger charter will be adopted as an international standard, effective immediately. But there was still one problem: the Tier 1 lockdown. Until the system was released by its active controller, more than 180 airports remained partially restricted. And the controller was still sitting quietly in row 34 of Flight 729. Whitmore's team drafted a direct communication to Adrian Cole. "FAA and IATA request your cooperation to restore full system functionality. Terms of resolution open for discussion." The reply came swiftly, but not in the way anyone expected. Adrian's conditions were clear: mandatory annual ethics training for all flight crews, independent oversight board with passenger representation, including advocacy for minors, disabled travelers, and marginalized groups. No passenger seat reassignment based on appearance or perceived status without documented operational reason. No demand for money, no request for public recognition, no legal immunity for himself or Cole Aviation. At FAA headquarters, the silence following the message was thick. One advisor finally muttered, "He's not asking for anything for himself, just protections." Whitmore's jaw tightened, but the decision was obvious. Approve it. Back on Flight 729, Adrian's phone displayed a final prompt. AeroEthics passenger charter enacted. Restore system access? His thumb hovered for a moment before tapping yes. Across the globe, airport systems began blinking back online. Boarding lines resumed. Loyalty programs unfroze. Gates resynchronized. But this time, they operated under new rules. Rules written not by corporate boards, but by a boy who never raised his voice. When Flight 729 began its descent into London, the news cycle was already ahead of the landing. Clara Benton's name had been formally entered into the FAA's ethics violation registry. The verdict was decisive: permanent ban from all FAA-certified airlines. In the forward galley, Clara sat in stunned silence. The last hours had stripped away every bit of confidence she carried at the start of the flight. She didn't look toward row 34. She didn't need to. At FAA headquarters, Director Whitmore faced his own reckoning. A press conference had been called. He stood at the podium, cameras flashing. The man who had sought to dismantle AeroEthics now spoke in carefully measured tones. "On behalf of the FAA, I acknowledge the vital role of the AeroEthics passenger charter in shaping safer, fairer skies. Cole Aviation's contributions to this framework are recognized and valued. We regret the circumstances that brought us here and commend the cooperation that resolved them. It wasn't just a policy reversal. It was a public concession." In the Cole Aviation boardroom, Alexander Cole received the broadcast in silence. Around the table, board members exchanged relieved glances. The company's stock ticked upward for the first time in days. Back on Flight 729, a senior attendant approached Adrian. "Mr. Cole," she said carefully, "first class is ready for you, should you wish to move." Adrian's gaze remained steady, the same calm he'd carried from 1A to row 34. "I'll stay here," he said simply. The attendant hesitated, then nodded and withdrew. The seat in row 34 was no more comfortable than when he first sat in it, but the skies had shifted. As the landing gear deployed, Adrian powered down his phone. The AeroEthics interface closed quietly, its task complete. Yet as the device went dark, a final automated broadcast rippled through every airport still synced to the system. Across terminal screens from JFK to Heathrow, from Narita to Dubai, the message appeared: power isn't in the seat you're given. It's in how you make the skies fair for everyone. AeroEthics protocol, passengers in lounges paused to read it. Staff glanced at each other. It wasn't signed with a name, but everyone who'd followed the events of the past 2 days knew who it belonged to. Flight 729 touched down smoothly at Heathrow. Passengers filed out, some casting quiet, knowing glances at the boy in row 34. Adrian stepped into the jet bridge without ceremony, disappearing into the steady flow of travelers. The world outside was already different.